Hey everyone. In this exercise we are going to learn how to deal with strings using Visual Basic Code. And this exercise refers to the the chapter on strings in the VBA primer. And we have this table of string functions that allow us to do a whole variety of things whenever we're dealing with text and strings. A lot of these functions have an equivalent function in Excel that you can use in just standard formulas, but this specific set of functions we use in Visual Basic, and sometimes it's really helpful to be able to manipulate strings inside Visual Basic. So to start off with just a very simple exercise, we have this spreadsheet where the user inputs string into cell B4, and you click on a button and it runs some code and then outputs some modification of that in cell B6. And so, for example, one of these has already been completed, the Pig Latin button. I've got some code there that when you click on that button it'll convert your input string to Pig Latin. Just for fun, we can jump over and look at our the code associated with that. Let me resize this window to fit our screen here. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but just point out that it's sitting here. You can download the spreadsheet or the Excel file associated with this exercise by clicking on one of the links below. And this just has some code here that goes through the logic to determine or to convert an individual word into Pig Latin. So that's kind of fun. You might want to look at that later, but we're going to jump in and do step number one, write a subroutine for the uppercase button that converts the text string to all uppercase characters. And as you may recall from the let's see, wrong button here, from the VBA primer, there's a uCase function and an LCase function that converts a string to either uppercase or lowercase. So that's what we're going to use, and it's going to be super simple. We're going to go into design mode, double click on the uppercase button, and we're coding right down here. And we're basically going to read something from cell B6 and B4 and write it in the modified version into cell B6. So we can do this with one line of code. Range B6 equals uCase range B4. So really all we're doing is we're saying take the current value of B4 and pass it to the uCase function. That converts that string to all uppercase, and it doesn't change it inside the cell. It makes a copy of it and returns that as the return value for the function, and that is then what is stored in cell B6. So I'm gonna copy that line of code to the clipboard, and then we're going to go back, and while we're at it, let's just do the next one, LCase. So we do Control V to copy that. We're going to change the U to an L. So that does the same thing. We're just using the LCase function instead of the uCase function. So let's go back and try these out. We'll save our changes. And here we go, uppercase, lowercase, uppercase, lowercase, Pig Latin. So that's pretty basic. And again, there's a way you can do that using a built-in Excel function as well. For example, I think it's called lower. There we go. I can go like that and say, well, there it is in lowercase, and I can say upper. Instead of LCase and uCase, it's upper and lower. Oops, let me see. I want to take that one, convert that to uppercase. So yeah, we can do the same kind of thing using an Excel formula, or we can use our Visual Basic code. So here's one, reverse. We want it to copy this text but have it reversed. And if we go back to our, the table over here, there's this function called str reverse that will reverse the order of that string for us. And that's a handy little function. I found a lot of occasions to use that over the years. So str reverse, and I'm going to again copy or paste from the clipboard. I'm going to say str reverse. So just take the string from range B4 and reverse it and throw that in B6. It's as simple as that. String functions are super easy. And there we go. Uppercase, lowercase, reverse. Alright. So yeah, that's it for the first 3 buttons. Now let's look at the next one. Step number 4, write a subroutine for the remove button that prompts for a substring using the input box function and removes the substring from the input string. So we're actually going to, in addition to doing a little work with string functions, we're going to learn about the input box object. And so let's jump over here. And input box allows us to prompt the user for some input. In this case, we're going to prompt the user for a string. So we're going to say dim my str as string. So this is a variable. Say my str equals input box, and that requires a prompt. Please input a string, and then the title would be, let's see, let's call this remove text. That's what we'll put on the title. And then the next argument, we're well into the optional arguments at this point. It's a default value, so if you want the text box in the input box window that comes up to have something already loaded in it, you can put it here. But we don't want to do that. Let's just go like this, and then let's just try it at that point before we go any farther, just to see what this looks like. We'll save our changes, and so basically here it is. It looks just like the message box, except it has this place down at the bottom where you can input something. So remove text, this is a title, please input a string, this is the prompt, and then the user can select OK or cancel. Now, by the way, if the user selects cancel, here's what happens. Let me go back to the code. So we call this as a function, meaning it's going to return something, and then we're going to store that in this myString variable. Well, if the user selects cancel, it returns an empty string. So we could use an if statement to test on that if we want, or we could just, in this particular case, we could just roll with it. Because what is it we're trying to do? We want the user to input a string, for example, world, and then we are going, if the user clicks OK, we're going to take that string, and we're going to, that's input, and we're going to remove that from this main input string, and write the result with that string removed in cell B6. And to do that, we are going to use the replace function. Replaces each instance of find with replace and expression. So wait a minute, we're not replacing it, we're removing it. Well, if you replace a string with an empty string, then that basically removes it. And so that's what we're going to do. All right, let's give it a shot. Go back here, enter design mode, and remove. So at this point, when we get to this point in the code, the myStr contains the string that the user wants us to remove from that from the main string. So we're going to say, let's go back to our thing. We're going to go range B6 equals replace, and the first argument is going to be range B4. So that's the expression we start with. What we want it to find is the contents of myStr, the string we just put in, and we're going to replace it with an empty string. So here, let me review that again. So we threw up the input box, asking the user to enter a string. We're going to store that. The return value from the input box is whatever the user entered. We're going to store that in MySDR, and then we're going to call the replace function. The first argument is whatever's in cell B4. The second argument is what we want it to find, which is the string the user just put in, and we're going to pass that as a variable. And by the way, you'll notice I did not put MySDR in double quotes. That's a really common error people make when they do this kind of, or when they start using strings. MySDR is a string variable. It contains a string. You would never put that string variable name in double quotes, because by so doing you change it from a variable that contains a string into a literal text string, MYSTYR. Those are two very different things. We want it, what we really want to use here is the value of that variable. So we just leave it just like this. Okay? And then we're going to replace it with an empty string, which will in effect remove that string from the input string. Alright, let's give that a shot. Let's try world, the example we had, and there it goes. Alright, let's try it again. Let's try morning. Let's try something like, let's just try the letter O. Look at that. Let's try a space. Huh. Works great. So again, that's how the input box works, is whatever the user enters here, that gets passed back as the return value for that function, and then we, using the replace string function, we just search for that string that the user entered and replace it with an empty string, and we are done. So that completes the first 4 steps of this particular exercise. The last step involves writing a custom user form, and I'm actually going to leave that for a subsequent video a little bit later on, once we start talking about custom user forms. So that includes our very brief introduction to strings.